A stubborn blindness persists here amidst the trees and the undergrowth. For too long we have been unable to witness the ample signs of forms of life residing here. Millennia before the devastating events of European first contact and subsequent occupation, the landscape was tended with care. There were villages and storehouses, fisheries and tilled fields, and the wide-ranging cooperation of clans. We humbly extend our respects to the Dja Dja people of the Dja Dja Wurrung language community, the original custodians of these unceded lands. We offer our debt of gratitude to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Pre-contact, the landscape provided what was needed because of the careful practices at work here. The remains of respectful land management are easily overlooked. They tell of non-Western modes of occupation that were in no need of signed contracts of ownership. Instead, tribal agreements and a logic of kinship relations was respectfully observed. Dja Dja Wurrung means people of the forest. Whose stories are distinct from those of the riverine and those closer to the bay and the coast. Part of the Kulin Nation, their moieties are Bunjil, the wedge-tail eagle, and Wa, the crow. Moieties determine kinship and descent, or effectively who you can and can't marry. Did you hear the evening chorus? There are babblers and whistlers, butcher birds and ravens, currawong and magpies hereabouts. Vulnerable and endangered are the shoveler, crake, curlew, egret, and a great many others. 65 species of threatened birds find their habitat in this region, to say nothing of mammals, fish, reptiles, amphibians, and invertebrates. Knowledge is shared through stories passed down, through rites and rituals performed, including shared practices of land management and artful engineering. Stories of colonial misadventure have near obliterated the stories passed down through millennia. Acts of barbaric violence resulted in the erasure of ways of life and the deadly logic of terra nullius, which assumed that none had cultivated and settled here before the white European man. When they arrived, in their infected boats, spreading disease and a foreign logic of land claims, intoxicating substances and firearms, they took advantage of the storehouses and fish traps before destroying them. A Western colonizing logic of property rights came to determine how land and its resources could be secured and controlled. European superiority and entitlement produced racialized subjects left dispossessed of their land, bereft. A stubborn blindness persists yet, blind to over 60,000 years of continuous inhabitation and intimate knowledge of country. Too many stories have been lost. If we are able to learn from Indigenous knowledge of country, what futures will this knowledge lead us toward? Is it possible to imagine a greater corroboree that might conjoin our efforts? The house requires that the land is cleared. Planned cycles of plantings and the importation of livestock mean the eradication of the fields of yams that once held root. The introduction of thirsty foreign seed require more of the soil than the soil is prepared to give. Hard-hooved European mammals, horses, sheep and cattle, wreak havoc where formerly the soft-pawed kangaroo and her mob passed near unnoticed. Kangaroo tracks and the passage of other marsupials break paths through the undergrowth. The land is cleared and the walls are raised, and then, as a precaution, fences are constructed. Signs of fortification are to be found in the diaries of settlers and in early paintings of their basic constructions. Rather than reading what is extant, these paintings tend to remember the bucolic countryside that has been left behind. Fortification signals the perception of danger, the fear of trespass. A fence defines a claim for land, saying inside and outside. Mine and not yours. Right of passage is effectively severed and otherwise prohibited. A roof is constructed and a wide veranda keeps off the brutal summer heat. Nearby, a reservoir is excavated for the sake of convenience. Containment and supply begin to impose their infrastructural logic at a scale that explicitly transforms the landscape. Europeans settle in place, refusing to see what has been there before them. Their perceptions and interpretations are culturally coded, which means for the most part they cannot see what is before their very eyes. Subtle means of slowing, capturing, easing the flow of creeks and riverways, the use of channels, block points and weirs, as well as finely woven nets, had been implemented for countless generations. An elaborate tool set of hoes, knives and spears was shared. This was work undertaken in relation to seasonal patterns, working with ancient religious environmental knowledge, or using animal skins as well as pottery containers to store supplies. Possum skins in the cooler months are delicately stitched together as cloaks. The colonizing Europeans take more and expect more than what is available. On arrival, the more observant of them note how the landscape appears like a well-kept park. The native trees loom large and the grass seems clipped. Indigenous traditions of managed fires have assisted in producing this effect. Pastoralism soon devastates the found park, hardens the spongy soil, disrupts waterways, which leads to a decline in kangaroo and emu populations. Inevitably, squabbles break out between Indigenous people and recently arrived squatters. A white man is speared for abusing Indigenous women. The squatters retaliate disproportionately. Influenza wreaks its toll where gunfire does not meet its mark. After just a few seasons, the early visions of a well-kept park, with its subtle irrigation systems, evidence of storage and supply, settlements and patterns of movement, are all but obliterated. Newly arrived convicts and settlers instead bear witness to a passive, silent, and taciturn peoples, their necks bent in servitude and exhaustion. Disenfranchised, cut off from their spiritual homelands and daily practices. The memory of the sensitive and slow custodianship of the land will be all but obscured. A brutal history will unfold that is genocidal in effect, if not intent. What happens when the landscape speaks back? By now we must begin to project the unsettling idea of the landscape without the presence of the human subject. Environmental crises and climate events, the toll on landscapes of extraction, the violence that comes with the avaricious insistence of mining interests, species extinction, pollution. So much has been lost, so much thoughtlessly destroyed. A fence, a gate, signs of ownership that cordon off and carve up space. We are now venturing into the field. A field cleared in preparation for an event. Most clearings such as this one suggest the preparation of the land in readiness for agricultural interests. A mob of kangaroos suddenly make an appearance in the southwest quadrant. They hear the dogs barking and disperse. Remember the parklands, the evidence of care expressed there. The diaries of early explorers speak of fertile fields and haystacks composed of collected grasses, grain that was collected and ground into paste, seed that travels the whole continent, passed from one tribe to the next. Villages in clusters of circular huts clad in bark and grass and coated in clay, and sometimes constructed with stone. Organised groups of women once bent over digging for yam. Passing through, you may not at first notice where smaller and larger camps were once set, usually close to the waterways. Firestones and ashy soil leave behind the traces of past meals. Yams, tubers, roots. Reptiles, mammals. Small fish, yabbies, insects. Birds' eggs, nuts, berries. Once steeped in water for some time, the blossoms of the ironbark make a sweet drink. String, bone, shell and reeds formed part of the local economy. Bulrushes were prepared in earth ovens. Large nets were produced to catch fish in the waterways. Elaborate eel traps can still be discovered here and there. Life was once managed by close observance of the seasons and by following the materials environmentally available. There were cooperative relations established between humans and non-humans. Sacred sites are associated with spiritual persona and stories to be told. Patterns of kinship establish relationships with others as well as with the universe. Relational systems compose a complex environmental knowledge and associated responsibilities. Following the devastations of colonial territorialization, is it possible to imagine the emergence of other possible worlds where a sharing of knowledge again prevails? The challenge is to speculate upon utopian futures and invest in a decolonizing ethos. While there is no return to the well-kept park with its carefully managed resources, yet there is much that can be learned. Fostering biodiversity, embracing the rhythm of the seasons, acknowledging the subtleties of microclimatic zones, exploring indigenous modes of agriculture and aquaculture, pushing back at the threat of ongoing species extinction, taking the time to pay attention. All this is possible. What seed gifts can we offer to each other as a matter of care and survival? What other practices might we perform together?